How are you doing?
Hi Hannah, how are you?
Great, how are you?
Good.
So I just would like to ask you to start by introducing yourself first.
Sure. My name is Thomas Guiglio, and I'm a composer based in Chicago. I'm originally from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I have been in the US for 15 years now, and in Chicago for 10.
Mhm.
I'm a guitar player. That's how I started in music. And eventually, somewhere in my early years of undergrad, I switched to composing. And I've been doing that for the last, I would say, 20 years.
How did you switch from, like, what made you decide to switch from playing guitar to composing?
Um, I was always interested in creative playing. I was improvising. I was part of all these free improv groups in Buenos Aires. We would do music related to Argentinian folklore, but always very improvised. I was also playing jazz, so I guess that from that sort of like creative thing, it was a natural step to composing. I became more interested in notating things, and the types of things I wanted to notate sort of belonged to what we can call the contemporary music um, bag of things, let's say.
Is there anything like specific that like gave you inspiration to start composing?
Um, those first, I remember during my undergrad, those first creative exercises that I had to compose, very basic stuff, theme and variation,
Mm.
um, types of things. I really got into it. Like really enjoyed it. I felt it, And
Oh,
eventually I started pursuing that more and more. Um,
mm,
and then I fully switched to composition,
I
like
see.
full time. But yeah, it at some point you just, you feel it. You realize that that's where it's at.
What about now? Like, what kind of inspires you to start a composition?
Um, well, there's always the very material spark of somebody asking you to write a piece,
Mm,
you know. And then I would say in general, you can divide my inspiration in kind of like two ways. One is um, I start working in very kind of like abstract terms with numbers and
mm,
this, kind of like number-based way. I have like this.
mm.
So this is a duo, for example, right? You see all the numbers.
Yeah. Oh, these are chords.
These are rhythms actually for this one. You
Oh,
have so you
really?
have numbers here, and then you have like a melody there. So
Uh-huh.
this is pretty abstract. Then I grab this and write the duo. This is I use this
Oh,
for two flute duo. Yeah. So that's the point of departure, just to start something. And then I now for the last 5 years I've been working around the kind of same concepts related to nostalgia. I've been working with this old Argentinian movie, a musical from the 40s, black and white, that is very melodramatic, very intense. And I've been sourcing that movie for the last 5 years
mm.
in what is now like 7 pieces. Maybe I should stop soon.
All right, keep going.
Or keep going. We'll see.
Um, so I think it's is there like something, well, I know that you've been working on this like piece for or this theme for a while. Is there something else you want to explore with a next composition?
Yes, a couple of things.
Mm,
I would say something that's been kind of like looming. It's like working with AI or integrating AI in some form or shape. And I have no idea where that might lead, but I'm hoping I'll be able to do some of that next year. And also, I've been writing a lot of vocal music lately.
mhm.
Like I think my last 7 pieces I wrote included the voice. So I kind of like want to go a little bit into opera,
Mm,
which is not easy
right.
because it's a lot of people that need to be involved in a process like that. But that's something that has always interested me,
Mm,
and I'm just hoping for the opportunity to be able to jump on that. But those two things take a lot of time. and that it's hard to make the time for those things. So I'll probably have to choose one or the other. Yeah.
What do you meant by integrating AI into your composition? Do you mean like what do you mean by that?
I, I don't know what I mean by that. I'm looking forward to start researching it. You know, there's a lot of I work in a little bit of music technology. There's a lot of automating processes that you can do already at a pretty sophisticated level. But I would like to go a little bit more into, you know, generative things. I'm not sure how much that has been a part of new music, really. I that research is a little bit lost on me, and I want to catch up, basically. And
Hmm.
from there, see what I can do.
I know
See how I
that
can apply that.
some composers are really like wary about AI going into music. Like I don't some people feel like it's like taking away authenticity from like modern or music composition.
Sure.
What do you think?
I am not worried,
Mm.
but I'm less worried than other people, maybe. Because I mean, you know, I think creatives have always find a way to adjust to whatever technological advancement happened. Um, there's a lot of things that can be done with AI, maybe more efficiently, but and cheaper. That's very important. But other things, I'm not sure. Um, I'm not sure, really. But to respond to your question directly, is I'm not too worried, but I am not sure why I'm not too worried. Maybe I should be more worried. Are you worried?
I don't know whether I'm worried, but I'm wondering how different the quality of music might be. I'm not really sure though.
Uh-huh. You're a violin player, right? Sure. I mean, it's gonna take quite some time for AI to be able to replace a live violin player.
Right.
So at least live performance element is for a long time going to still be there.
Mm.
But yeah, I wonder. When I talk to my students about this, I wonder, you know, how do they feel about it? Because
Yeah.
they're going through their education knowing that AI is there. It's like a bit of like a very, in a way, traumatic sandwich. On one hand, you have the pandemic. On the other hand, you have AI, and then you have to, you know, navigate that. So yeah.
I know, like I've seen like videos of like robots like playing violin. I don't know, it's like amazing,
Are,
but
are they
also
good?
yeah, I mean not really, but
Okay,
I feel like
for
it won't
now.
take that much time to like
Uh-huh.
make it advance so much. Um
But to get to the point where you go to a performance of a robot playing the violin and resembles what it would be to go and see a violin recital by a human person, I think that should be far away from
yeah.
today. Or I'm speaking, you know, from absolute ignorance on the matter, but I don't know. It
Yeah.
doesn't seem. It's what you know when you saw those movies from the '60s or cartoon from the '60s, and they have the flying cars.
Yeah.
Well, we are in 2024, and you know, flying cars exist, but they're not on the street. So maybe it's
Yeah,
one of those type of situations.
maybe.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. Like what I think maybe AI, you know how you're saying how you start with numbers? Like maybe
Yeah.
it could generate them in a way.
Oh,
I'm not
that part for sure. I mean, that
okay.
part, yeah, absolutely. And that's has been possible for a really long time.
Mhm.
I just still enjoy the speed of doing it by hand.
I see.
In doing that very automatic, or in a way, um, it's not a very creative exercise. It's just, you know,
Mhm.
in that exercise something happens with creativity that I think, if I were to automate that process, it might not happen.
Mhm.
um, it's like, you know, it keeps you busy on something very mechanical, and then other parts of your brain light up.
Mhm.
That's why I still do it with a pencil in hand.
I see.
Mhm.
Like do numbers they represent rhythms?
Yes, in this
Okay,
case, yes.
okay.
So
Yeah.
let's say if the unit you're taking is let's say the 16th note, number 4 would be a quarter note
Oh,
because it's
okay.
4/16th note. Number 3, it's, you know, a dotted eighth,
Yeah.
etc.
Okay. I see. How do you feel that coming from Buenos Aires like kind of affects your composition?
Um, Buenos Aires is a very interesting place. It's as any, let's say, post-colonial big city, it has everything. It has layers of different moments in time. You know, Buenos Aires has a lot of like France in the early 20th century, for example. The architecture is very French.
Mm,
Um, of course, it has the Hispanic thing from before, and now it's basically you know. In terms of culture, it's a mix of that with the American thing, with so it's very mixed
mm,
in terms of the cultural landscape, and I feel I very much come out of that, and my music, it's very much a mix of those things.
mm,
um, so yeah, that I think that's how we live there. You know, one day you're walking through this kind of like Parisian looking city, listening to Led Zeppelin, and you know
yeah.
it's a mix, and you know, and you speak Spanish, so um, I think that's very interesting, and it's creatively very, you know, very fertile ground, I would say.
Mm. What are some like challenges that you face as a modern composer? I'm sure it's hard. Like I
Yeah,
can't imagine doing.
sure, it's hard. It is hard. I mean, the challenges are the ones that you can probably imagine, you know.
Mhm.
Financial finding stability is not easy,
Mm,
especially with, you know, jobs, teaching jobs in academia are increasingly more and more precarious in the types
really? Okay.
of deal they offer. There's a lot of adjuncting. You know, adjunct teaching means that you don't have health benefits or retirement benefits. You're basically hired to teach a class, and there's a lot of that,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the jobs that offer a more stable situation. So I would say that I personally found a way to to not depend on that so much. I work in admin. I'm the managing director of an
Mm,
ensemble Niente. Um, so yeah, it just to make it work financially, it's tricky, and how that affects the time you have to compose.
mm-hmm.
Balancing that is a challenge. Something that has been happening, I think, not only with composers but across the board after the pandemic, is mental health issues
Mm,
related to basically the purpose of what you're doing. You know,
mm,
it's tricky after the pandemic to be like, what I do is important. You know, keep that momentum going.
yeah.
But that's not only for composers. I think to some extent everybody was hit by that.
Mm,
But other than that, I don't want to end on a low note. Other than that, I love it.
yeah.
I love writing. The time of writing. I love working with performers. It's something that I really really love. You know, and as we again uh, we leave the pandemic behind, it's starting to feel a little bit more like it was before, and you
Mm.
know, I'm liking it.
It's so crazy that it was like 4 years ago. It feels like
Yeah,
yesterday.
it feels, yeah. I mean, COVID is still around, but
Yeah.
that first hit in April 20, let's say April, that's
Mm,
when things started shutting down.
yeah.
Yeah, was crazy.
I know some people, some composers were talking about how there's this sort of bad reputation for modern music and like
Mhm.
wondering how do you kind of advertise yourself out of that? Because I don't know, no, people really think that it's an issue.
Bad reputation. Uh, yes, I think I know what you mean, but can you be a bit more specific?
Like, I know for modern classical music, especially people are like, oh, it's so atonal. It just like doesn't have melodies. It's just hard to listen to. But I mean, there's so many different kinds of modern music, and I think people
Sure.
know that.
Yeah, definitely. I think for the type of music that I think you're referring to, which could be located, this is going to be a generalizing, but could be located as, you know, high modernist music that's the product of American academia between the 60s, 70s,
Hmm.
and a little bit beyond.
Hmm.
what you're saying, I don't think it's wrong per se. I mean, it's music that it's hard to listen, especially if you're not immersed in that environment in
Mhm.
academia, but after that, and especially since minimalism arrived in the picture,
Mhm.
um, contemporary music has opened its doors to a wider audience, I would say.
Mhm.
But for the specific style that you're talking to, yeah, that's where maybe the bad reputation comes from a little
Yeah.
bit.
Mhm.
But and I say minimalism, and there's a lot of other aesthetics that are very much welcoming and propose something that it um, it doesn't expel whoever is not, it's less cultish in a way.
Mhm.
Um, how do I advertise myself out of that? I don't.
Okay.
Music is not easy
Yeah.
listening per se, but
Mhm.
I think if someone is willing to listen to it attentively, there is something there.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's just it, it I don't know of any composers that advertise themselves against. That's not true. I do know
Mhm.
composers.
I see.
So I guess the music speaks for itself to that regard, I would
Mhm.
say. Um, yeah,
Mhm. Okay.
but what you're saying, it's not wrong. It's something that
Mhm.
has remained in popular culture, that
Yeah.
contemporary music is hard.
Yeah.
And I think part of the mission that we have in terms of making sure that it's changed is showing music that is new and not necessarily hard to listen to.
Mhm. Like on that topic, are there any like trends or movements or like foundations you think help widen the modern music industry a bit more?
In terms of like educational
Yeah, yeah.
uh, initiatives, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yes, I mean that role ended up being the purview of basically contemporary music ensembles,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like ensembles have an educational outreach arm to themselves, and they work with organizations that might already be in high schools or in places like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right? Flexical, that's part of your mission, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So exactly that, which I think it's awesome, by the way. I was looking at your website. I think it's
that's great.
wonderful. Here in Chicago, I can think of two that I think are doing really good work in that regard. It's I don't know if you know Third Coast Percussion. It's a
Mm.
percussion quartet,
Yeah.
and they have a very strong educational program.
Mm.
They work with schools. They go there. They play the instruments with the students, and do creative work. And I think Decompose is mostly a string orchestra here in
Mm-hmm.
Chicago too, and also they have a very strong um, educational arm with
Mm.
contemporary music.
Mm.
If you move to classical music, there are a lot more that do that, but specifically to contemporary music, I can think of those two, and I'm probably forgetting uh, others. Those two, and of course
Right.
classical.
I'll check them out. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, you should. I mean, you should reach out because they've been doing good stuff for years now.
Okay, great. Um, you said do you have students? Like, what do you teach?
Until last year, I was teaching at Northwestern. I was teaching the theory sequence and the oral skills sequence here at
Oh, I see.
Northwestern here in Evanston.
Yeah.
This year, I'm not doing it, and I don't think I'm going to be doing it next year either. But I love teaching, but it's just I wanted to focus on composing a bit more.
Yeah. I don't know.
Mhm.
Some people were talking about how like they want to teach more like modern music into like education programs now, like other than staying to like the tradition.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, part of what I really liked about my job at Northwestern was that I the theory sequence started, in the Baroque. It was
Mhm.
very timeline based, so it started basically in the Baroque and went all the way until yesterday, in a way, into the 20th century.
Mhm.
So I got to work. I got to basically start working with them in the music that they're used to,
Mhm.
basically classical and romantic, and then maybe help them make the transition into listening to music that, as we were saying before, is not the easiest. Uh,
Mhm.
and into music that already becomes a little bit more friendly.
Mm,
I really like that aspect of teaching the entire sequence.
mm. I think that like definitely helps like students understand like modern music more, right?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of ways of I mean, traditionally the narrative is to teach, contemporary music as some kind of like break from what was there before,
Hmm.
some kind of departure from what was there before. But there's a lot of connections that can be made. There's always connections that can be made
Hmm.
between any style with common practice music. And once you find them and you highlight them for the students, they have something to latch on to, and things hopefully become a little bit easier in
Interesting.
terms of getting used to the new music. Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest difference between like more traditional music and modern music?
Um, I think again it depends on what specific style are you talking about of new music.
Uh-huh.
Going back to what we were saying before, people
Yeah.
tend to react to a certain kind of like ugliness of
Yeah.
like basically basic dissonance when we're talking about pitch, dissonant pitch. If you're talking about rhythm, very like jagged types of rhythm. We're talking about dynamics. We're talking basically fundamentally loud dynamics.
Hmm.
So every parameter is kind of like doing something you're not used to.
Hmm.
But in terms of the main difference, I would say is, or what I try to focus on when I am teaching is that it requires a different type of listening in a way,
Hmm.
and that type of listening has to do more with switching from listening to rhythms, melodies, emotional highs and emotional lows, a type of like emotional with rhetoric in a way, trying to keep that. There's no reason to drop that, but focus more on listening to and being able to enjoy just sound. That you can have a chord that stays there for a long time, and you can enjoy that. Yeah.
Hmm.
The composer we use for that traditionally to illustrate that switch is Debussy.
Hmm.
Still very much a romantic composer in some senses,
Hmm.
but everything is kind of like slowed down, right? So
Yeah.
you have to enjoy timbre in a way,
Hmm.
to learn to enjoy timbre as a parameter that can drive the interest of a piece forward.
Right.
That's what I try to focus when I'm teaching that transition. You know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. but I think that's at least one step.
I see. Do you ever incorporate like extended techniques in your composition? Like I know they some composers don't really stay with the usual like technique
Mhm.
that is assigned to an instrument.
Yes, I do.
Mm, like what?
um, I'm not. I don't go like super out there when it comes to extended techniques,
Mhm.
but when it comes to string instruments, you're a violin player, it became kind of common practice for composers to incorporate at least a few ways of dealing with, for example, bow pressure. There's a lot of sophistication when it comes to bow pressure.
Mhm.
Bow location, sul
Mhm.
tasto, ordinario, sul pont, that's gonna be there for the
Mhm.
most part. Left hand pressure.
Mhm.
Sometimes you actually play harmonic pressure, pressure in between, over pressures. There's a lot of different things that happen that are not super far away from traditional playing, but could be considered extended techniques.
Mhm. Okay.
Those are the things that I use. I don't go much further than that. Um, but you can have, for example, instrument preparation, where you have to add things to the instrument,
Oh, yeah.
like uh, you can add a number of things like paper clips. You can add, what's the thing where you for hanging the clothes. You can
Oh,
add
yeah.
those, yeah, and they change the sound of the instrument altogether. Yeah,
Mm.
of course you have scordatura. That is not extended technique, but you can detune the instrument.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, you'll find those eventually. I don't do much of that, really.
Yeah, I
Um,
know it's like now in like the composition environment, it's like there's a lot more freedom to do what wasn't like allowed before, you know.
uh-huh. Have you ever encountered a technique that you were like, what the hell is this?
There's some weird like markings in the instrumentation that's like it's a little bit weird.
Uh-huh.
Or
Like,
like tempo directions, it's like a
okay,
lot freer. Like it's
sure.
like imagine you're walking through mud. Like that's like I don't know, like interesting, right?
I mean, that paints a picture. If you're playing
Yeah.
something and they tell you play it like you're walking through mud, you would go like
Yeah.
heavy and yeah, totally. Um, but yeah, to answer to your question, yes, I use them, or at least I think of the instrument as something that has possibilities beyond what it is used for during the common practice, let's say Baroque, classical, Romantic period. Yes,
Mm.
definitely.
Just to end it off, because now I think that's all I have for you, but how would you describe your like style of music?
My, um, I saw in your website you have these 4 categories, right?
Mm-hmm.
For contemporary music, I think it was high modernism was here, postmodernism was here, neo-romanticism, and I believe I forget the fourth one. Um, but I would say it's somewhere between, if you take that square, I would say somewhere in between postmodernist
Mm-hmm.
and high modernist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you know composers like Morton Feldman or John Cage, somewhere around there too. I like Webern quite a bit. Um, so if you take that square, I would say it's somewhere between, yeah, modernist and postmodern,
Mm.
a little bit romantic too.
Yeah.
Um, I like that little square that you have over
Yeah.
there.
That's kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if there's anything else you'd like to add.
No,
All right,
this is great. This
cool.
is fun.
Yeah,
And
thank
congratulations on all the work you're doing with Plexical. I think there's a lot of potential there.
yeah, thank you. I think it's just modern music should be shared more.
Yeah, yeah. There's no reason why people, shouldn't at least experience it for a bit
Yeah,
and make a decision. I think, getting it in front of people is already something that it's work, and you're doing it, and that's awesome.
thank you so much. All right.
Absolutely.
I'll let you know when this is posted on the website.
Great.
All right. All right. Thank
Please
you.
do.
Yeah, have a great week.
You too. Bye, Hannah.
Bye.